Oklo is probably the most successful nuclear startup, at least as far as raising money goes. Unlike most of the companies that I've done videos about that were privately held, Oklo is publicly traded and has a market cap of about $10 billion. This is quite a valuation as they have zero revenue. Not that they're losing money, they have no income. And significant revenue is at least 5 years away in even the most optimistic scenario. In the old days, a company with no revenue wouldn't even consider going public because it's very hard to figure out how much such a company is worth. They've raised enough money by selling stock that they have an impressive $1.2 billion cash on hand. So today on Decarbonize, we're going to look into Oklo. What are they doing? Does it make sense? And since they're publicly traded, is it a place you want to invest? Oklo has three related businesses: creating radioisotopes for cancer treatment, a small modular reactor for generating electricity, and a plan to reprocess spent nuclear fuel to power their reactors. The radioisotopes will be the first to generate revenue, but not a significant amount, so I'm going to focus on their other two businesses. For those who don't know what a small modular reactor is, the idea is you build a nuclear reactor where everything complicated is built in a factory and delivered on site as a module that delivers heat. The heat then can be combined with the steam turbine to generate electricity or used directly at an industrial facility like a steel mill or a chemical plant. Oklo's marketing material shows a building that looks like it belongs at Lake Tahoe. Inside are a reactor and a steam generator that can produce 75 megawatts of electricity. If you need more power, you can string together as many modules as you need. It will take 15 of these modules to equal one of the large AP1000s like those built recently in Georgia. Oklo's approach is a sodium-cooled fast neutron reactor like the natrium reactor that TerraPower is building in Wyoming. Rather than using water to take away the heat, these reactors use liquid sodium as a coolant. There is no moderator like water or graphite to slow the neutrons. This has the advantage that these reactors can burn uranium-238, which is what most of the fuel is, not just uranium-235, which is rare. Because of this, fast neutron reactors generate much more energy per kilogram of fuel and leave behind fewer long-lived waste products. On the downside, the fast neutrons don't react as easily with uranium-235, so the fuel has to be enriched to 20% uranium-235, which is called HALEU, or high assay low enrichment uranium. They've secured enough of this fuel to get started, but there is no reliable domestic supply of HALEU at this time. The other concern I have with liquid sodium reactors is that the coolant reacts explosively with water. If an earthquake and tidal wave like the one that hit Fukushima hit an Oklo reactor, it's possible for the liquid sodium to mix with water and explode, spreading radioactive fuel widely. This wouldn't be a nuclear explosion, but similar to a dirty bomb. If you want to learn more about liquid sodium fast neutron reactors, you can check out my video on natrium. Right now, Oklo is building a pilot plant at the Idaho National Lab. This design has not been reviewed by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or NRC, but has had some lighter level of review by the Department of Energy, or DOE, as I discussed in this video. It's not even clear that the design is complete. As I stated in that video, I'm not wild about someone building a nuclear power plant before the design has been carefully reviewed by a third party. The goal is to have a reactor fueled and running by July of 2026. It's tough to build anything that quickly, so I have no idea how you build a novel nuclear reactor with an incomplete design by then. Just no idea. But doing something is a great way to learn how to do it and get better at it. I'm sure they'll learn a lot, which should influence the design. How that interacts with the design review at the NRC is unclear to me. So let's talk about Oklo and the NRC. On Oklo's website, they brag that they, quote, made history by submitting the first custom combined license application for an advanced fission technology to the NRC. What they don't mention is how the NRC responded to their first application. As the NRC wrote in a letter of January 6, 2022, quote, "The purpose of this letter is to inform Oklo of the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission staff's decision to deny the custom combined license application for the Aurora microreactor. Oklo has repeatedly failed to provide substantive information in response to the NRC staff's request for additional information on the maximum credible accident for the Aurora design, the safety classification of structures, systems, and components, and other issues." That application was for a microreactor delivering only 1.5 megawatts of electricity. Oklo has since resubmitted their application to the NRC for a 75 megawatt power plant, which is a more reasonable size. I bring this up because the first round with the NRC doesn't demonstrate a mature organization on the part of Oklo, that they submitted something without understanding what the NRC was looking for. Hopefully they learned from that experience, though I'm not sure, as they started building a plant without having a reviewed design. They are moving through the pre-application activities using a novel, accelerated process that they claim will shave years off the licensing timeline. But it looks like they're just skipping steps and taking on more risk and increasing the odds that the application will be held up. For a more detailed explanation, you can check out the great videos on Oklo by Atomic Blender, linked in the description. There have been a lot of changes at the NRC and the DOE under Trump. One risk is that the new administration may review the situation and roll back some of these changes, forcing Oklo into a longer, more rigorous process. My guess is that there was a need for change, but the Trump administration threw out too much, and the next administration will end up with something halfway between where we are and where we were. A bigger risk is that the lack of rigorous design review will allow Oklo to build a reactor with a flaw that is discovered late in the process, where the impact to the budget and schedule is worse. The worst case scenario is a flaw that isn't discovered until the reactor goes live, and the damage may be to more than budget and schedule. It's not hard to imagine this happening with the pilot reactor being built in Idaho, since its design hasn't been carefully reviewed. Though Oklo touts 400 reactor years of operating experience worldwide, only 2 operational sodium-cooled plants have been built since 1995, one in China and one in Russia. And I'm not sure how much learning has been transferred from those plants to Oklo. So I think the chance of a surprise is significant. What Oklo is doing isn't like Ford turning out a new version of an F-150. This is like SpaceX introducing a new rocket, and sometimes those blow up. Oklo has signed an agreement to supply Meta with power starting in 2030 and to scale up to 1.2 gigawatts by 2034. Optimistically, this is their first significant revenue. This isn't a bad thing, but I don't think it's very important. If Oklo is able to provide power at a reasonable price, they'll succeed. There is no shortage of customers interested in reliable electricity at a reasonable cost. Oklo's other major business is reprocessing spent fuel. I spoke about this in my video on nuclear waste, and you can go there if you'd like more details. Oklo is planning to use pyrolysis and electrorefining, which is a high-temperature electrochemical process that separates out the fission products from the uranium and transuranic elements. If you want to recycle spent nuclear fuel, it's critical to remove the fission products, what the uranium splits into when it releases energy. The fission products absorb neutrons and poison the chain reaction. That's why this fuel had to be removed from the reactor, not because there wasn't fuel left to burn. The fission products take up just a few percentage of the total volume of the spent fuel and are dangerous for just a few hundred years. So it's much easier to deal with them than the raw spent fuel that's deadly for over 100,000 years. What is left is mainly uranium and transuranic elements like plutonium that will be made into new fuel. It can be burned in Oklo's reactors or somebody else's. It's unclear to me if the reprocessed fuel needs to be enriched in uranium-235. Oklo is building a plant to do this in Tennessee that they plan to have operational in the 2030s. They're planning on privately raising $1.68 billion needed to build this plant. One of the reasons that the U.S. abandoned reprocessing is that it was cheaper to mine uranium from the earth than from spent fuel, because the spent fuel is so radioactive, it's very hard to work with. And it's not clear that Oklo's process will be any better. The other problem was concern that the traditional reprocessing created pure plutonium, and there's a fear that that material could fall into the wrong hands and end up in a bomb. Oklo's process never creates pure plutonium, but a mix of plutonium and uranium, which is not weapons grade. So that's a good thing. One of Oklo's strengths is that if either of these businesses succeed, they can justify their valuation, and either business can survive even if the other fails. For the reactors, I'm not optimistic about the economics of SMRs. NuScale, the only company with an improved SMR, has been unable to sell any of them due to the high cost. Oklo's reactor is a much more novel design, and their NRC approach is very risky. If they can't keep their costs of the electricity down, that will kill them. They need to compete with other nuclear reactors plus other sources of energy like solar and wind. Similarly, for reprocessing, cost will be an issue. They mainly need to compete with mining, as no one is currently doing reprocessing in the US. But there are other startups like Curio working on the problem. There's enough nuclear waste to keep a couple of companies going, especially if one of the SMR companies succeeds, increasing the demand for nuclear fuel and the supply of spent fuel to reprocess. I'm inclined to agree with Atomic Blender in his assessment of Oklo, that their legacy is more likely to be reprocessing. But even there, it's going to be an uphill battle, as the economics of reprocessing have always been bad, and I don't see anything that has changed significantly. Would I buy their stock? Nope. Too much risk and too long until they have revenue. Should you? I don't know. I'm not your or anyone else's financial advisor. If you disagree, please let me know in the comments. And since you've made it to the end, I'm thinking a like and subscribe might be in order. You can support my channel by buying me a pint. I really appreciate this support, as it lets me know that I'm not wasting my time, that you're getting value from what I'm doing. And thanks to all of you who have supported me in the past. You also might enjoy more of my videos on nuclear fission, and please share this video with everyone you know who is considering investing in Oklo.